Спасибо.
Thank you.
Дарья, Хайнц, Таба.
Taria, Heinz, Taber, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also very glad to meet you once again. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank both the Russian and foreign participants of the Valdai International Discussion Club for your substantive contribution to the work of this club. And I'd like to thank our distinguished guests for their willingness to participate in a frank, open discussion. Our distinguished moderator has wished me a good retirement in due time, and I wish that for myself as well. This is going to happen, but until I have retired, since I'm still the head of a large power, and that's why I have to show restraint, and I have to tread carefully about what I say. Aggressiveness is not my style. But still, I think in this audience, we have to be frank with each other. We have to engage in an open discussion. Otherwise, it's going to be absolutely senseless. It's going to be bland and uninteresting. So that is the style set forward for our discussion. I think it's in great demand today. Against the backdrop of the drastic changes we're witnessing in this world, the current topic of the Valdai Club today starts our future. The shaping of tomorrow is very apt. Last year, here, we talked about chaos and the world order. Unfortunately, over the last months, we have not seen any changes for the better. To be honest, there have been no changes for the better. The controversies related to the redistribution of political might and influence are only growing. Mutual mistrust narrows our capacity to respond to the challenges the international threat is faced with, the real threats, the real challenges. The very globalization project is under threat. In Europe, we know that, we hear that. We hear talk about the failure of multiculturalism. We believe that this situation is to a large extent due to hasty, mistaken choice, self-complacent choice that was made by the elite of several countries 25 years ago. Back then, at the end of the 80s, beginning of 90s, there was a chance not just to spur forward the globalization process, there was a chance to make these processes harmonic and sustainable. But judging themselves to be the winners of the Cold War, some countries have chosen to reshuffle the world order to make it suit to their interests. They were in the grasp of euphoria, and they have virtually decided not to engage in frank dialogue with other participants of the world life. They didn't want to perfect the existing mechanisms. They have decided to broaden their and expand their values, their norms, their mechanisms all over the world. They have chosen their own way of security for the select, not for everyone. But as it has turned out, not everyone agrees with that. Let's be quite frank, we understand full well many were in disagreement, but some simply could not withstand the pressure. Some was not ready to do that. But as a result, the world relations system is always febrile, so to speak. The world economy is in a systemic crisis. The principles, the rules that exist both in politics and in economics are constantly reshuffled. Quite often, we see a U-turn with regard to several years ago was a dogma, a norm. If the powers that be see that something is suitable to them today, they make all the rest follow the new standard. But if these standards become obsolescent in their views, they are jettisoned and new rules are set, or at least there are attempts at doing that. So a decision was taken to use missiles against Belgrade and the heart of Europe, then against Iraq, against Libya. And in Afghanistan, as we know, the operation was launched without the sanction of the UN Security Council, trying to turn to their advantage the strategic balance. Some countries have decided to demolish the international legal regime that prevented the deployment of new ABM systems. Terrorist groups were established and provided with arms. Their atrocities push thousands, millions of people to migration, and whole regions have been plunged into chaos. We see that the freedom of trade is being sacrificed. So-called sanctions are used to exert political pressures in circumvention of the WTO. Closed economic alliances are established with firm rules, and only the transnational corporations of the countries that establish these blocs gain the fruit of that. Why is this happening? Because these countries fail. They have failed to sort everything out within the WTO, so they have decided to put the WTO aside. That's what I've mentioned. And we do not see the willingness of our partners to sort out the issues in true. There are some obsolescent structures like NATO. Despite all the talk about the need to adapt to the new reality, we have seen no adaptation. There is another important mechanism to ensure the transatlantic security, the European security, the OSCE, and there are attempts at turning this organization into an instrument of someone's political interests. So what the OSCE is doing is simply void. Mythical threats are devised, like the so-called Russian military threat. Certainly, this can help gain some advantage, get new budget, make your allies comply with your demands, expand NATO, deploy the equipment and troops closer to our border. Certainly, it is very pleasant to pass for the champions of civilization against the new barbarians. But the thing is, Russia is not trying to attack anyone. That would be ridiculous. Yes, I read your analysis, not just those who are present here today. I hear the analysts from Europe, from the US, and I see that these suggestions are simply ludicrous. In Europe, there are 300 million people, all are members of NATO. I think the US population is 600 million, whereas the population of Russia is just 140 million people. So it would be ludicrous. And yet, such menaces are used as a pretext to serve their own political interests. Hysteria has been fueled within the US with regard to Russia's alleged influence upon the current presidential election. Indeed, the US has many acute challenges like the colossal public debt, to an upsurge in violence with lethal arms used, and arbitrary reactions of the police. I think this is what they should talk during the election. Probably they should talk about that. But the elite do not have much to say. They do not have anything to pacify the society with. So it's far easier to divert the attention of people, to concentrate their efforts on Russia's alleged spies or conduits of influence. I'm wondering, I'd like to pose the same question to you. Is there anyone who seriously thinks that Russia can in any way influence the choice of the American people? Is the US a banana republic? The US is a great power. If I'm wrong, please correct me. So a question arises. Should all of this continue like that in future? What do we have in store for the world? What would the world look like tomorrow? Is there an answer to such questions as how to ensure security, stability, economic growth, sustainability? How can we expand the welfare of our people? However sad that may seem, there is no consensus with regard to these matters. In the world, probably during the discussions that have taken place here, you have arrived at a common conclusion. If that is the case, I'd be curious to listen to that. But certainly there is a shortage of strategies and ideologies for the future, and this in turn creates an atmosphere of incertitude which has a direct impact upon social sentiments. Social surveys and polls conducted all over the world testifies that people across all continents view future as something gloomy, something looming. Future is not bright and encouraging. It is frightening. People do not have mechanisms to influence this future, to influence the choice of the politics.
Well, yes, formally. There is every aspect of democracy in modern countries: elections, freedom of speech, access to information, the right to express opinion, but even in the so-called developed democracies, most citizens do not have any real influence on the political processes. They do not have a direct, real influence on the authorities. Citizens feel that their interests and the ideas of the elite about the only right course are very different and are increasingly different. As a result, elections and referendums surprise the authorities because people do not vote in the way authoritative, respectable mass media sources advise them to do, not as it is recommended by the so-called system parties. Public movements which were considered too pro-left or too leftist or rightist are pushing back the political hard weight. First, these results were announced, something abnormal. When these results repeated once again, ideas were voiced that the society does not understand those people who are actually at the Olympus. And there is even hysteria that this is a consequence of foreign, as a rule, Russian propaganda. Let me tell you, dear friends and colleagues,